5 years after a bitter divorce, Emily is called back to the Davidson empire. Ethan needs her help and is willing to pay dearly for it. But when secrets from the past come to light, she realizes that this marriage charade may be hiding something far more dangerous. The click of Emily Vaughan's high heels echoed through the corridors of the luxurious Davidson Hotels and Resorts office. Her heart was racing, but her posture remained impeccable, as always. 5 years had passed since she last set foot in this place, and now she was back, summoned by an unexpected phone call from her ex-husband. The elevator doors opened on the top floor, and she took a deep breath before walking down the mirrored hallway that led to the president's office. Her reflection in the mirrors showed a different woman from the one who had left years ago. Her brown hair, once long, was now cut to shoulder length, framing a more mature and determined face. "Miss Vaughan," the secretary greeted her with a formal smile. "Mr. Davidson is waiting." Emily nodded, unconsciously adjusting the white blazer she wore. When the office door opened, she found herself face to face with the imposing figure of Ethan Davidson. He was standing with his back to her, looking out over the city through the panoramic window, but turned when he heard her footsteps. "Emily," he said, his deep voice filling the room, punctual as always. "You didn't leave me much choice, Ethan. Your lawyer was quite insistent about the urgency of this meeting." Ethan gestured to the chair in front of him, and Emily sat down, elegantly crossing her legs. The silence that followed was filled only by the soft hum of the air conditioning and the distant noise of the city below. "I need your help," he finally declared, the words coming out as if each one cost him an immense effort. Emily raised an eyebrow, an ironic smile forming on her lips. "The great Ethan Davidson needing my help? That's new." "I'm not joking, Emily. I'm about to close the biggest deal in Davidson Hotel's history, a partnership that will triple our presence in the Asian market." "Our presence?" she interrupted. "As I recall, you made it clear that I had nothing to do with your business when we separated." Ethan ignored the comment, continuing, "The investors are extremely traditionalist. For them, family stability is as important as the numbers, and right now my image as a divorced man is weighing against me in negotiations." Emily began to understand where this conversation was going, and her heart raced even more. "What exactly are you proposing, Ethan?" "A marriage," he replied directly. "A facade, of course, just for the time necessary to close the contract and implement the first phases of the project." The laugh that escaped Emily's lips echoed through the room. "You must be joking." "50 million, Ethan declared, making her stop laughing instantly. "That's how much I'm willing to pay for your cooperation." Emily stood up, walking to the window. The city stretched out beneath her feet, a labyrinth of buildings and dreams she knew well. Her mind worked quickly, weighing the implications of this absurd proposal. "Why me?" she finally asked. "You could hire anyone to pretend to be your wife." "Because you already know the role," he replied, approaching. "You know my family, my friends, the social circle. We wouldn't need to create a story from scratch. And more importantly, you know how to keep secrets." The last sentence made Emily turn abruptly to face him. Their eyes met, and for a moment the weight of unspoken memories hung between them. 3 months, she said finally. "That's how long you have to close your deal. After that, we each go our separate ways, and you transfer the money to my account." Ethan extended his hand, a formal gesture that seemed absurdly inappropriate for the situation. "Do we have a deal?" Emily looked at the outstretched hand, knowing she was about to plunge into dangerous waters, but there was something bigger at stake, something Ethan couldn't imagine. With a decisive movement, she shook his hand. "We have a deal." The following week, news of the Davidson couple's reconciliation made headlines in the country's major newspapers. The story of love overcoming differences and withstanding time enchanted the public, and more importantly, impressed the Asian investors. The wedding was set for 2 weeks from then, enough time to create the spectacle everyone expected, but not so long as to raise suspicions about the rush. Emily found herself plunged into a frenzied routine of dress fittings, carefully orchestrated, interviews and strategic public appearances alongside Ethan. During one of these appearances at a charity dinner, Emily noticed something different in the behavior of Margaret Davidson, her former mother-in-law. The family matriarch, always so controlled and diplomatic, seemed restless, her eyes constantly turning to the entrance of the ballroom. "Is everything all right, Margaret?" Emily asked, approaching with 2 glasses of champagne. "Oh dear." Margaret smiled, but the smile didn't reach her eyes. "Just tired, you know how exhausting these events can be." Before Emily could insist, Ethan appeared at her side, his hand possessively resting on her waist. The gesture, rehearsed to appear natural, sent an involuntary shiver down her spine. "We need to circulate," he murmured in her ear, and Emily nodded, saying goodbye to Margaret with a kiss on the cheek. As they crossed the ballroom, greeting guests and posing for photographs, Emily couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. It was as if everyone around her was playing roles in a play whose full script she didn't know. On the eve of the wedding, during the rehearsal at the church, an apparently trivial incident caught her attention. One of the flower arrangements fell, scattering white roses across the marble floor. While helping to pick them up, Emily found a small folded envelope among the petals. With her heart racing, she discreetly tucked it into her purse, waiting for a moment of privacy to examine it. When she finally managed to lock herself in the church bathroom, her hands were shaking as she opened the envelope. Inside was just an old photograph yellowed with time. In it, a group of men smiled at the camera, among them Ethan's now deceased father. On the back, a single handwritten sentence: "Some secrets should remain buried." Emily felt her blood run cold. The photo confirmed her suspicions, but also exponentially increased the danger of the game she was about to play. She knew she should tell Ethan, show him the photo, explain everything she had discovered in recent years, but she also knew that if she did, her carefully crafted plan would crumble. The sound of knocking on the bathroom door startled her. "Emily, is everything okay?" Ethan's voice sounded from the other side. "Yes, just a moment," she replied, quickly tucking the photo back into her purse and checking her makeup in the mirror. Her reflection showed a composed, controlled woman, but her eyes revealed the turmoil of emotions she was trying to contain. As she left the bathroom, she found Ethan waiting for her, his expression a mixture of irritation and concern. "The photographer is waiting for the rehearsal photos." "Sorry," she smiled, her face a perfect mask of serenity. "You know how brides get nervous on the eve of the wedding." Ethan studied her for a moment, as if trying to decipher something in her expression. Finally, he offered his arm, and together they walked back to the nave of the church. As they posed for photos, smiling and pretending a happiness that didn't exist, Emily knew she was about to cross a point of no return. The sham marriage she had planned as revenge was turning into something much more complex and dangerous. The next morning, as she prepared for the wedding in one of the suites at the Davidson Palace Hotel, Emily looked out the window at the city, sprawling below. The sky was surprisingly clear for a winter day, as if nature itself was conspiring to make the spectacle even more perfect. A soft knock on the door brought her back to reality. It was time to begin her transformation into a bride. As the team of makeup artists and hairdressers worked, Emily kept her eyes closed, her mind wandering between the past and the present, trying not to think about the uncertain future that awaited her. The wedding dress, an exclusive model in French lace and silk, rested on the king-size bed. As she put it on, Emily couldn't help but notice the irony of the situation. 5 years ago, she had worn another white dress to marry the same man, that time driven by true and naive love. Now, she was about to repeat the vows, but every word would be part of an elaborate lie. What no one knew, not even Ethan, was that this lie was about to reveal long-buried truths. Truths that could change not only their lives, but the entire Davidson empire. The wedding day dawned with a peculiar energy at the Davidson Palace Hotel. The corridors of the 10th floor, reserved exclusively for the ceremony, were filled with staff moving with military precision, ensuring that every detail was impeccable. In the presidential suite, Ethan adjusted his tie in front of the mirror, his thoughts distant from the present moment. The decision to reenact his marriage to Emily seemed increasingly complex. There was something in her behavior in recent days that intrigued him, an almost imperceptible shadow behind her perfect smile. A knock on the door interrupted his reflections. It was Jason, his best friend and CFO of Davidson Hotels. "The investors just arrived," Jason announced, closing the door behind him. "Mr. Chen seems especially pleased with the whole arrangement." Ethan nodded, satisfied. The plan was working exactly as he had planned, or almost. "Any news about that audit I requested?" he asked, instinctively lowering his voice. Jason hesitated before answering, a gesture that didn't go unnoticed by Ethan. "We found some inconsistencies in the company's old records. Documents that should be in the central archives seem to have disappeared." "What kind of documents?" "Mainly contracts from your father's time, records of some properties acquired during the initial expansion of the network." Jason paused as if carefully choosing his next words. "Ethan, are you sure you want to keep digging into this matter? Sometimes the past should remain where it is." Before Ethan could respond, a commotion in the hallway caught his attention. Raised voices and the sound of breaking glass echoed. Through the door. Upon opening the door, he encountered a surreal scene. Margaret Davidson was standing in the middle of the hallway, surrounded by shards of a broken vase, her normally composed face now marked by a frightening paleness. "Mom!" Ethan approached quickly, concerned. "What happened?" Margaret was holding a crumpled envelope in her trembling hands. This was in my room," she murmured, extending the envelope to her son. Ethan carefully opened the envelope. Inside was an old photograph, similar to the one Emily had found in the church, but this one showed a different scene. In the image, his father appeared in a restaurant, accompanied by men Ethan didn't recognize. On the back, the same mysterious handwriting. "Time reveals all secrets." "Who left this here?" Ethan asked, his voice assuming an authoritative tone. The nearby staff looked at each other nervously, but no one had an answer. Margaret, regaining some of her composure, touched her son's arm. "It's nothing, darling. Just a tasteless joke. Let's not let this ruin this special day." But Ethan knew his mother too well to believe her words. There was something in her eyes, an old fear he had never noticed before. At the other end of the hotel, Emily was finishing the final preparations. The wedding dress, a masterpiece in lace and silk, fell perfectly over her slender body. As the makeup artist gave the final touches, she observed the city through the panoramic window, her mind a whirlwind of thoughts. A message on her cell phone brought her back to reality. It was from an unknown number. There's still time to give up. Some truths are too dangerous to be revealed. Emily deleted the message with trembling hands. Was she going too far? The plan she had architected for years, motivated by an obstinate search for the truth, was beginning to seem more dangerous than she had ever imagined. A new knock on the door announced the arrival of Sarah, her old friend and only confidant. "It's time," Sarah said, but her smile faltered when she saw the expression on Emily's face. "You can still back out, you know." Emily took a deep breath, adjusting her posture in front of the mirror. "No, I can't. We've come too far." "But at what price, Em? Is it really worth putting everything at risk for revenge?" "It's not just revenge, Sarah. It's justice." Emily turned to her friend, her eyes shining with an iron determination. "You don't know even half of the story." "Then tell me. Let me help." Emily hesitated. There was so much she wanted to share, so many secrets weighing on her shoulders. But the more people knew the truth, the greater the risk. "After the ceremony," she finally promised, "tonight I'll tell you everything." The distant sound of classical music began to echo through the hotel corridors, announcing that guests were already starting to arrive for the ceremony. Emily took one last look at her reflection, making sure her mask of serenity was perfectly in place. In the main hall, transformed into an improvised chapel, the most important guests from the business world were beginning to take their seats. Mr. Chen and his entourage occupied the front row, their faces expressing approval at the grandeur of the event. Ethan was already in his place at the improvised altar, his impeccable posture masking the uneasiness he felt. His eyes discreetly scanned the room, looking for any sign of something out of the ordinary, any indication that more unpleasant surprises might arise. His gaze crossed with that of his mother, who now seemed to have fully regained her composure. Although her fingers still nervously played with the pearl necklace she wore, a gift from her late husband. The music changed, announcing the bride's entrance. The doors of the hall opened, and Emily appeared radiant in her white dress. A murmur of admiration ran through the guests, and even Ethan, accustomed to keeping his emotions under control, felt something stir in his chest. As she walked down the central aisle, Emily maintained a serene smile on her lips, but her mind was far away. In a few hours, when night fell over the city, all the secrets she had kept for so long would begin to come to light. The priest began the ceremony, his grave voice echoing through the hall. The words about love, trust, and loyalty sounded like a cruel irony for the couple standing there, representing an elaborate farce in front of an unsuspecting audience. When it came time for the vows, Ethan held Emily's hands, their eyes meeting. For a brief moment, something passed between them, a connection that went beyond the business agreement they had made. It was as if both realized they were about to plunge into much deeper and more turbulent waters than they had planned. "I, Ethan Davidson, take you, Emily Vaughan." The words came out of his lips automatically, rehearsed to perfection, while his mind tried to decipher the mysteries that were beginning to accumulate. The photo found by his mother, the missing documents, Emily's strange behavior. There was a pattern forming, but he still couldn't see it clearly. Emily, in turn, repeated her vows with a conviction that surprised even herself. Each word now carried a different weight, no longer just part of an act, but promises that hid truths ready to be revealed. When the priest declared them husband and wife, the applause from the guests filled the hall. Ethan leaned in to kiss Emily, a kiss that should have been just another element of the charade, but which carried an unexpected electricity. The reception that followed was a spectacle of luxury and elegance, exactly as expected from a Davidson event. Mr. Chen and his associates circulated among the guests, clearly impressed with the entire display of power and family tradition. But beneath the perfectly polished surface of the celebration, invisible currents of tension were beginning to form. Margaret Davidson alternated between gracious smiles and worried glances at the entrances to the hall. Jason, the CFO, frequently consulted his cell phone as if expecting important news. And Emily, at the center of it all, danced in the arms of her new old husband, aware that each passing minute brought her closer to the moment of truth. In her room, kept in a safe that only she knew about, was a set of documents that would forever change the fate of the Davidson family. As the night progressed, the tension in the air seemed to increase. Ethan noticed that his mother had discreetly disappeared from the party, and when he went to look for her, he found only her abandoned purse on one of the lobby sofas. Inside the purse, a new envelope, this time containing only a yellowed newspaper clipping. The headline, dated 20 years ago, spoke of a mysterious fire in one of the first hotels in the Davidson chain. What caught Ethan's attention, however, was a handwritten note in the margin of the paper. "Ask your wife about the night of March 15th. Ethan felt his blood run cold. March 15th, the date his father had left, the date that had changed everything. Night was falling over the city when Ethan and Emily finally arrived at the penthouse of the Davidson Palace Hotel. The bridal suite had been decorated with white roses and scented candles, an attempt to create a romantic atmosphere that only highlighted the artificiality of the situation. Emily walked to the balcony, her fingers nervously tapping on the tempered glass railing. Below, the last guests were leaving the reception, luxury cars departing one by one. The wedding dress, still impeccable after hours of celebration, shimmered under the moonlight. "Your mother disappeared very early from the party," she commented without turning around. Ethan, who was pouring 2 glasses of champagne, paused for a moment. "Have you noticed?" It wasn't a question, but a statement. Emily had always been too observant for her own good. "Just as I noticed that you found something in her purse," she continued, finally turning to face him. "What was it, Ethan?" He walked over to her, extending one of the glasses. Their eyes met, and for a moment both recognized the familiar dance of half-truths that had always characterized their relationship. "Why don't you tell me?" he replied, his voice controlled. "What happened on March 15th? Emily felt the air escape from her lungs. The date she had feared hearing had finally been pronounced. Her hands trembled slightly as she accepted the glass of champagne. "Perhaps we should sit down," she suggested, moving to the interior of the suite. At that moment, an envelope slid under the door, capturing both of their attention. Ethan was the first to reach it, but Emily already knew its contents before he even opened it. Inside were 3 photographs. The first showed Ethan's father in his office, apparently in a heated discussion with a man neither of them recognized. The second depicted the same unknown man talking to Margaret Davidson in a cafe. The third, however, made Ethan's blood run cold. It was a photo of Emily taken just a few weeks ago, secretly meeting with that same mysterious man. "Who is he?" Ethan demanded, his voice trembling with contained anger. Emily walked to her purse, retrieving a flash drive. "His name is Alexander Morgan, and he worked with your father during the initial expansion of Davidson Hotels. Why were you meeting with him?" "Because," Emily took a deep breath, "he has proof that your father didn't build this empire alone. In fact, the Davidson Hotels rightfully belongs to another family." The silence that followed was deafening. Ethan collapsed heavily onto the sofa, the photograph still in his hands. "What are you talking about?" Emily connected the flash drive to the laptop on the table. "March 15th wasn't just the day your father left, Ethan. It was the day he discovered that someone had found the original partnership documents." A series of files began to appear on the screen. Old contracts, bank records, handwritten letters, all telling a very different story from the one Ethan knew. "The Morgan family was the majority partner in the first hotels," Emily explained, her voice soft but firm. "Your father was just a hired manager. But when Charles Morgan, the patriarch, had an accident, your father saw an opportunity. He altered documents, transferred properties, and gradually took control of everything." Ethan shook his head in disbelief. "This is impossible. Your father was a brilliant man," Emily interrupted, "but he was also too ambitious. He transformed Davidson Hotels into an empire, yes, but on tainted foundations." "And how did you discover all this?" Ethan asked, his voice laden with suspicion. Emily hesitated. It was the moment she both feared and awaited. "Because I'm a Morgan, Ethan. Alexander is my uncle." The revelation hit Ethan like a physical blow. He stood up abruptly, knocking over the champagne glass. "All this time, our marriage, the first one was real," Emily interrupted him, tears glistening in her eyes. "I really fell in love with you. But when I discovered the truth about our families, I needed to do something. This second marriage was an opportunity to finally bring the truth to light." Ethan staggered to the balcony, needing the fresh air to organize his thoughts. Memories began to fit together. His mother's strange behavior, the missing documents, the mysterious messages. "My mother knows," he muttered, more to himself than to Emily. "Yes," Emily confirmed, cautiously approaching. "She always knew. She was the one who found the original documents on that March 15th. She tried to confront your father, but what?" Ethan turned abruptly. He had already made his decision. That same night, he left, taking with him all the evidence he could find, but not all of it. A noise in the corridor caught both their attention. Hurried footsteps, muffled voices. Ethan walked to the door, but before he could reach it, his cell phone vibrated with a message. It was Jason. "Your mother is in the hospital. We need to talk, now." Ethan felt the world spin. He looked at Emily, who was still holding the flash, drive as if it were a bomb about to explode. "Why now?" he asked, his voice almost a whisper. "Why reveal all this right now?" "Because the Morgans are coming back, Ethan. Alexander isn't the only one who survived. And they don't just want the truth. They want to recover what's rightfully theirs." The cell phone vibrated again. Another message from Jason. "Bring the flash drive, and don't trust anyone." Ethan looked at his newly wedded wife, the woman he had loved, betrayed, and now discovered to be part of a much larger plot than he had imagined. "Are you coming with me?" he asked, extending his hand. Emily looked at the outstretched hand, remembering how it all had started, with a similar gesture in his office. History was repeating itself, but this time all the cards were on the table. "Yes," she replied, intertwining her fingers with his. "It's time for everyone to face the truth." As they left the bridal suite, Neither of them noticed the small camera installed in the corner of the ceiling, nor the man who was watching everything through a monitor in a van parked behind the hotel. The man picked up his phone and typed a quick message. "They're on their way, the plan continues." The corridor of St. Luke's Hospital was silent when Ethan and Emily arrived. Jason was waiting for them near the reception, his tense face betraying the gravity of the situation. "How is she?" Ethan asked, still holding Emily's hand. "Stable. It was just a minor heart attack, but the doctors want to keep her under observation." Jason looked significantly at the couple's joined hands. "I see you've talked. Where is she?" Emily asked, ignoring the comment. "Room 507, but she's not. Alone? Alexander Morgan arrived a few minutes before you." Ethan felt Emily stiffen beside him. The mention of her uncle's name changed everything. They looked at each other, a silent communication passing between them. In room 507, Margaret Davidson was sitting on the hospital bed, paler than usual, but still maintaining her characteristic posture. Alexander Morgan was standing near the window, a tall man with graying hair and a severe expression. "Son," Margaret murmured upon seeing Ethan. Her eyes widened slightly when she noticed Emily. "So you already know?" "Not everything," Ethan replied, entering the room with Emily. "But I want to know. Now." Alexander moved away from the window, his steps measured and calculated. "Your mother was about to tell me where the original documents are." "The ones my father took?" Ethan asked, his voice laden with irony. "No," Margaret intervened, her voice weak but determined. "The ones I hid." A heavy silence fell over the room. Emily released Ethan's hand, approaching the bed. "Aunt Margaret," she said softly, using the familiar term for the first time. "Why did you keep this for so long?" Margaret closed her eyes for a moment as if gathering strength. "To protect everyone. Your father, Ethan, was a complex man. When he discovered that I had found the documents, he became different, unrecognizable. He threatened." Her voice faltered. "Threatened what, Mum?" "To reveal other secrets," she whispered. "Secrets that would destroy more than just fortunes." Alexander took a step forward, his presence dominating the small room. "What secrets?" Margaret looked directly at Emily, tears beginning to form in her eyes. "Your mother, she didn't leave in an accident as everyone thinks." Emily felt her legs weaken. Ethan instinctively supported her, guiding her to a chair. "What are you talking about?" Alexander demanded, his voice trembling. "Helena, my sister, discovered something about Charles's accident," Margaret continued, each word seeming to cost her an immense effort. "She confronted Robert, but he couldn't let the truth come to light." Ethan felt his world crumble. His father wasn't just an ambitious man who had taken over a company. He was something much worse. "The documents," Margaret continued, her voice firmer now, "are in a safe at the old Morgan mansion, the same place where it all began, but you need to understand, revealing the truth now won't bring Helena back, it won't change the past." "No," Alexander agreed, his voice laden with contained emotion. "But it can ensure justice in the present." A noise in the corridor caught everyone's attention. Hurried footsteps were approaching. Jason, who had been guarding the door, quickly entered. "We have problems," he announced, breathless. "The Asian investors discovered something. They're threatening to cancel the entire deal." Ethan cursed under his breath. Mr. Chen and his entourage had been the reason for this whole sham marriage. And now, "That's not all," Jason continued, his face even tenser. "I just received an alert. Someone is trying to transfer large sums from Davidson Hotel's accounts to tax havens." "Robert," Margaret murmured, bringing her hand to her chest. "He must have discovered that the documents were found." Emily stood up abruptly. "The mansion is 2 hours from here. If we leave now—" "No," Ethan interrupted her. "First, we need to stop these transfers. If my father manages to divert the money, there won't be a company to dispute." Alexander checked his watch. "I can handle the transfers. I have contacts in the banking system who can temporarily freeze the movements." "And the investors?" Jason asked. "Leave that to me," Emily responded, surprising everyone. "I know the real reason why they're threatening to cancel the deal, and I can solve it. Ethan studied her for a moment, realizing once again how he had underestimated the woman he had married, twice. "All right," he decided. "Alexander handles the banks, Emily the investors. Jason, you stay with my mother. I'll go to the mansion." "Not alone," Emily protested. "He won't go alone," a new voice sounded from the door. Sarah, still wearing the wedding party dress, was standing in the doorway. "I'll drive." Margaret tried to get up from the bed, but Ethan gently stopped her. "Rest, Mom. You've kept these secrets for too long. Now it's our turn to solve this." As they left the room, Ethan noticed a strange movement at the end of the corridor. Men in dark suits were talking in low voices, occasionally glancing in their direction. "Sarah," he murmured, "are you sure you weren't followed?" "Absolutely," she replied. "But that doesn't mean they didn't know we'd come here." Emily's cell phone vibrated with a message. "The documents aren't the only thing hidden in the mansion. Be careful what you'll find in the basement." She looked at Ethan, deciding whether she should show him the message. Before she could decide, the men in suits began to move in their direction. "We need to go," Sarah urged. "Now." The group quickly separated, each departing for their assigned mission. As Ethan and Sarah ran to the parking lot, he couldn't help but think about how his life had completely changed in less than 24 hours. From a sham marriage to a family conspiracy, from a vengeful bride to an unexpected ally, nothing was what it seemed anymore, and something told him that the revelations were just beginning. The road to the old Morgan mansion snaked along the hillside, each curve revealing more of the abandoned property that stood against the night sky. Sarah kept the headlights off, guiding the car with only the moonlight as a guide. "Are you sure you're not being too cautious?" Ethan asked, his eyes fixed on the road ahead. "3 cars followed us from the hospital," Sarah replied, her voice tense. "I managed to lose them in the last town, but we can't risk it." The mansion appeared before them, an imposing 19th century construction that carried the weight of generations of secrets. The dark windows seemed like empty eyes observing their approach. "How do you know this place so well?" Ethan asked as they got out of the car. Sarah hesitated before answering. "Emily brought me here a few times. We were investigating." "You knew everything?" "Not everything, but enough to understand that your wife isn't the villain in this story." They approached the main entrance. The massive oak door was locked, but Sarah knew exactly where to find the spare key, under a loose stone on the 3rd step. The interior of the mansion smelled of mold and abandoned memories. The light from their flashlights revealed furniture covered by white sheets, like silent ghosts of a lost era. "The safe," Ethan murmured. "Where would it be?" "In the main office," Sarah replied, guiding him through the entrance hall. "But Ethan, there's something you need to see first." She led him to an old library. The shelves were still full of books, their spines faded by time. Sarah headed to a specific bookcase and pulled out a dark green volume. A metallic click echoed through the room, and an entire section of the bookcase moved, revealing a secret passage. "What is this?" "The true archive of the Morgan family," Sarah explained, descending the stone steps, "where they kept their deepest secrets." In the basement, they found a room full of old files and photographs. Sarah went to a specific cabinet and took out a yellowed folder. "This explains why your father did what he did," she said, handing the folder to Ethan. Inside were documents that revealed an even more complex truth. Davidson Hotels wasn't just a company, it was part of a much larger operation. The hotels served as a front for something that made Ethan's blood run cold. "Money laundering," he whispered, incredulous. "The Morgan family found out," Sarah continued. "They were about to expose everything when a noise on the floor above interrupted them. Footsteps. Someone else had entered the mansion. Sarah immediately turned off her flashlight. "We need to hide." But before they could move, a familiar voice echoed through the passage. "That won't be necessary." Robert Davidson, whom everyone thought was abroad, emerged from the shadows. His face, more aged than Ethan remembered, carried an expression of resignation. "Dad, you shouldn't be here, son," Robert said, his voice tired. "None of you should." "Why?" Ethan demanded, his voice trembling with contained anger. "To keep your secrets." To hide that you turned our company into... to protect you, Robert interrupted him. You don't understand. When I took control of the company, it was already compromised. Charles Morgan wasn't the honorable man everyone thought. Sarah took a step forward. Then why didn't you expose everything? Because the people involved, they don't forgive betrayals. Robert ran his hand over his face, suddenly looking very old. I tried to clean up the company, turn it into something legitimate, but they wouldn't let me. A new sound echoed through the basement, footsteps coming down the stairs. Emily emerged from the darkness, followed by Alexander. So that was it, Emily said, her voice laden with understanding. It wasn't just about money or power. Your mother discovered the truth, Robert said, looking directly at Emily. Helena was too smart for her own good. She found the original files, the transaction records. And you silenced her, Alexander accused, taking a threatening step towards Robert. No, Robert protested, backing away. I tried to protect her. I offered her a new identity, a chance to start over far away from all this, but she refused. Is she alive? Emily asked, her voice barely more than a whisper. The silence that followed was deafening. Robert looked at the daughter he never knew he had, pain and regret evident in his eyes. Yes, he finally answered, and she's closer than you imagine. Before anyone could react to this revelation, an alarm began to sound on their cell phones simultaneously. It was an emergency notification from the Davidson Hotel's security system. The investors, Ethan murmured, reading the message. They're not just canceling the deal, they're exposing the entire operation. It's not the investors, Robert said, his face pale. It's your mother. Margaret finally decided to tell everything. Emily's cell phone vibrated with a new message. It was from Sarah. The police are on their way, we have 10 minutes. Ethan looked at his father, then at Emily, and finally at the documents in his hands. In a few minutes, the empire his family had built would crumble. But perhaps from the ruins, something truer could emerge. It's time to end this, he said, his voice firm. All the secrets, all the lies. It's over. Robert nodded slowly, defeat evident in his posture. There's one more thing you need to know. About the real reason why the Morgans and the Davidsons initially united. Sirens began to sound in the distance, their wail cutting through the night like a harbinger of what was to come. The sirens were approaching the mansion when Robert Davidson opened a secret panel behind one of the basement bookshelves. From inside, he retrieved an old wooden box engraved with the symbols of the two families, the D of the Davidsons and the E, Morgan crest. This box belonged to our grandparents, he said, looking at Ethan and Emily. The true story begins with them. Opening the box, Robert revealed a set of yellowed letters and old photographs. The first showed two young men in early 20th century attire, smiling in front of a hotel under construction. Anthony Davidson and Frank Morgan, Robert explained. They weren't just partners, they were brothers. The revelation hit everyone, like a wave. Emily approached, picking up one of the photographs with trembling hands. The official records were altered, Robert continued. The true story was buried to protect both families. Anthony and Frank were sons of the same father, but from different mothers. When they discovered the truth, they decided to use their separate inheritances to build something together. The first hotel, Ethan murmured, recognizing the building, in the photograph. Yes, but there were powerful people who didn't want to see the families united. The empire they built attracted the wrong attention. Influential people began to use the hotels for their own operations. Sarah, who was monitoring the basement windows, interrupted. 3 minutes until the police arrive. Robert continued, his voice more urgent. When Charles Morgan discovered the extent of the illegal operations, he tried to clean everything up. That's when he suffered the accident. I took control, promising to maintain the status quo, but secretly, I began gathering evidence. And Helena discovered, Emily completed. Your mother was too brilliant, Robert nodded. She found not only the evidence of illegal operations, but also the original documents proving the family's kinship. She threatened to expose everything. Alexander, who had been silent until then, stepped forward. Where is she? Robert looked at the basement door, a small smile forming on his lips. "Why don't you ask her?" Sarah turned abruptly, her flashlight illuminating a figure descending the stairs. Helena Morgan, alive and stronger than ever, emerged from the shadows. "Mom," Emily whispered, her legs weakening. Helena crossed the basement in firm steps, her eyes fixed on her daughter. "Forgive me, darling, it was necessary." The sirens were now deafening. Red and blue lights began to illuminate the basement windows. "There's no more time," Sarah warned. "Time enough," Helena said, pulling a flash drive from her pocket. "Here's everything. The evidence of illegal operations, the original family, documents, the truth about Charles's accident, everything." Ethan took the device, looking at his father. "Why now?" "Because we finally have enough strength to face them," Robert replied. "With the families united again, with you and Emily." The marriage, Emily understood. It wasn't just for the investors, it was to officially reunite the families, Helena completed. To correct the mistakes of the past. The sound of doors being broken down echoed from upstairs. The police had arrived. "Now listen carefully," Helena said quickly. "Each of you has a role to play in what comes next." She handed out sealed envelopes to each of them containing specific instructions. "Follow the plan exactly as described. It's our only chance to expose the true criminals without destroying our family's legacy." Heavy footsteps were coming down the stairs. Ethan looked at Emily, then at the flash drive in his hands. In a matter of minutes, their entire world would change again. "Trust each other," Helena said, her voice firm. "It's the only way." The basement door burst open violently, revealing a team of heavily armed police officers. The flashlights blinded them momentarily. "Everyone freeze," one of the officers ordered. Ethan felt Emily's hand find his. At that moment, under the light of the police flashlights, two families separated by lies and united by secrets finally understood that their fate had always been intertwined. The real test was just beginning. The police station was buzzing with activity that early morning. In separate rooms, members of the Davidson and Morgan families awaited interrogation. Ethan, seated in an austere room, was rereading the instructions in the envelope Helena had given him. Detective Thompson entered the room carrying a thick folder of documents. "Mr. Davidson, do you have any idea of the gravity of the situation?" Ethan remained calm, exactly as the instructions indicated. "I believe I do, Detective. In fact, I have information that might interest the district attorney." In another room, Emily faced her own interrogation. Investigator Lisa Parker was watching her closely. "So you married the same man twice," Lisa commented. "Why?" Emily smiled softly. "The truth is more complex than it appears, investigator. I suggest you check the files that just arrived in your email." In the hallway, Helena was talking quietly with Alexander, while Robert remained isolated in another room. Sarah, who had been released after a brief statement, was heading to Jason's office with a specific mission. The plan was in motion. At Davidson Hotels, Jason was receiving an important call. "Yes, Mr. Chen, I understand your concerns, but I suggest you wait for the next 24 hours before making any decision." In her hospital room, Margaret Davidson was watching the news. The reporter announced, "Breaking news, documents reveal multi-million-dollar scheme involving businessmen and politicians. The Davidson family." Margaret turned off the television and picked up her phone. It was time to do her part. Back at EC, the police station, Detective Thompson was reading for the third time the documents Ethan had presented. His expression changed with each page. "This is extraordinary," he murmured. "The real criminals," Ethan explained, "are not the Davidson or Morgan families. We're just pieces in a much bigger game." In the next room, Emily was showing Investigator Parker the evidence that incriminated some of the most powerful men in the country. "These are the ones responsible for Charles Morgan's accident," she explained. "The same ones who tried to silence my mother." In the chief detective's office, Helena Morgan was presenting her own story. "All these years I worked undercover, gathering evidence. Every hotel, every suspicious transaction, everything was documented." As the morning progressed, new revelations emerged. Jason at the Davidson Hotel's office was receiving a sequence of important emails. Mr. Chen would not only maintain the investment, but double it. The Chinese, he explained over the phone to Ethan, were impressed with our transparency in exposing corruption. They say it's exactly the kind of partner they're looking for. Sarah, fulfilling her mission, was delivering a series of documents to the country's major newspapers. The next day's headline was already guaranteed: traditional families help dismantle international corruption scheme. By late afternoon, the families were released. The real target of the police operation was now the businessmen and politicians exposed by the documents. As they left the police station, Ethan found Emily waiting for him. She was holding 2 coffees. "Like old times," she offered, extending one of the cups. Ethan accepted the coffee, his fingers lightly brushing hers. "Nothing will be like old times." "No," she agreed. "It will be better." Helena approached the couple, accompanied by Alexander and Robert. "The first phase is complete," she announced. "But we still have work to do." "The hotels?" Ethan asked. "They will be restructured," Robert responded. "This time transparently and legally. The 2 families working together, as it should have been from the beginning." "And us?" Emily asked, looking at Ethan. He looked at her, seeing for the first time not just the woman he had loved and the spy who had deceived him, but something new, a partner. "I think we still have a marriage to make work," he replied, this time without lies. As they left the police station, a dark car approached. Margaret Davidson got out, supported by Jason. "I just received confirmation," Jason announced. "The Asian investors not only maintained the deal, but they want to expand the partnership. They say a family-owned company with ethical principles is exactly what they're looking for." Margaret hugged her son, then Emily. "You did it. You turned a tragedy into triumph." "It's not over," Helena reminded them. "We still have to rebuild everything." "Together," Ethan affirmed, his hand finding Emily's. The sun was setting on the horizon, painting the sky in golden hues. The 2 families, now reunited, observed the spectacle. "You know," Sarah commented, approaching the group, "you should write a book about all this." Everyone laughed, but there was truth in that suggestion. The story of the Davidson and Morgan families was a reminder that sometimes you have to lose everything to find the truth. And sometimes the truth is just the beginning of an even bigger story. The headquarters of Davidson Hotels was buzzing with activity that morning. 2 weeks had passed since the revelations at the police station, and the meeting room on the top floor was packed. Executives, lawyers, and members of both families were gathered to define the future of the empire. Ethan, seated at the head of the table, watched Emily present the restructuring plan. She had naturally assumed leadership of the process, her finance experience proving invaluable. "The merger of the Morgan and Davidson companies," she explained, pointing to graphs on the screen, "will create one of the largest hotel chains in North America, but this time with total transparency." Jason, now compliance director, added, "We've implemented international auditing systems. Every transaction will be monitored in real time." Mr. Chen, present via video conference, nodded approvingly. Next to him on the screen, other international investors showed equal satisfaction. Helena, seated next to Margaret, intervened. "But it's not just about business. We're creating a social development fund, using part of the profits for community projects. Starting," Margaret added, "with the restoration of the Morgan Mansion. It will be transformed into a cultural center." Alexander, who was coordinating the legal team, distributed a new series of documents. "All contracts have been reviewed. The old operations have been completely dismantled." Robert, present but in an advisory role, observed everything with a mixture of pride and regret. His gaze met Helena's across the table, decades of secrets and sacrifices finally giving way to truth. Sarah entered the room, carrying a red folder. "The latest market research has arrived," she announced. "Public opinion is on our side. The story of redemption and transparency has won the trust of customers." Ethan stood up, walking to the panoramic window. The city stretched out below, the chain's hotels dotting the landscape like landmarks of a new era. "There's something else we need to discuss," he said, turning to face the room. "Our marriage." Emily interrupted her presentation, her gaze meeting his. "This time," Ethan continued, "I want to do it right. No lies, no facades." He walked over to her, taking her hands in his. "Will you marry me? For real?" Silence fell over the room. Helena and Margaret exchanged emotional looks. "Are you sure?" Emily asked, her voice soft. "After everything?" "Because of everything," he corrected. "What started as a charade brought us to the truth. Now we can build something real." Sarah was the first to applaud, quickly followed by everyone in the room. Even Mr. Chen, on the screen, was smiling broadly. "The newspapers will love this," Jason commented. "The couple who exposed corruption and united two business dynasties." "That's not why," Ethan stated, still looking into Emily's eyes. "I know," she replied, smiling. "And yes, I accept." The meeting transformed into an impromptu celebration. Champagne was served, plans were made. But in a corner of the room, Helena and Robert were talking quietly. "Was it worth it?" he asked. "All these years of secrets?" Helena watched her daughter, now truly happy in Ethan's arms. "Every moment. Sometimes we need to lose everything to rebuild the right way." Margaret joined them, her presence completing the circle of reconciliation. The Davidsons and the Morgans, she reflected, always destined to be one family. On the big screen, the stock market numbers showed the company's shares rising. The market was responding positively to the merger and the new management model. Alexander raised his glass. "To the new Davidson and Morgan hotels, and to the family that finally found its way back home." Everyone toasted, but Ethan and Emily barely noticed. They were absorbed in each other, planning not just a business future, but a life together. Sarah, always attentive, captured the moment in a photograph. "For the family's historical archive," she explained. The afternoon sun was streaming through the windows, bathing the room in golden tones. It was a new beginning, built on the foundations of truth and redemption. On the meeting table, the new contracts were waiting to be signed. Documents that didn't hide secrets, but proclaimed a new era of transparency and unity. "Shall we sign?" Ethan asked Emily. She picked up the pen, her smile lighting up the room. "Let's write our own story." The wedding ceremony took place in the garden of the Morgan mansion, now fully restored. This time, there were no facades or lies, just two people who had found love through adversity. Emily, wearing a simpler dress than before but infinitely more meaningful, walked down the improvised aisle between the chairs. The late afternoon sun created a golden halo around her, and her smile was genuine as she met Ethan's gaze. Helena, next to Margaret in the front row, held the hand of her former rival, now friend. Robert observed the scene a few steps behind, his serene expression reflecting the peace he had finally found. "The rings?" the celebrant asked, and Sarah stepped forward with the rings. "I, Ethan Davidson Morgan," he began, placing the ring on Emily's finger. "Promise to honor not only our love but also the legacy of our families, this time with truth and transparency." Emily took the other ring, her eyes misty. "I, Emily Morgan Davidson, promise to build by your side a future based on the trust and love that survived the greatest storms." Among the guests, Mr. Chen and his wife smiled, truly touched. The Asian investors had become not just business partners, but close friends of the family. Jason, seated next to Sarah, was making discreet notes on his tablet. The merger of the companies was almost complete, and the numbers exceeded all expectations. Alexander rose to make a toast. "To the union that began as a business agreement and transformed into a story of redemption and true love." The party that followed was a celebration not just of Ethan and Emily's love, but of the union of two families that had finally found their way back to each other. In the mansion's office, now transformed into a memorial of the family's history, Margaret and Helena were organizing the last documents that told the true story of the Davidsons and Morgans. "Look at this," Helena said, showing an old photograph. "Anthony and Frank, the brothers who started it all. They would be proud to see their families reunited again." Margaret took the photo, her eyes soft. They always knew this day would come. That's why they left all those clues, all those documents. In the main hall, Ethan and Emily were dancing their first waltz as a truly married couple. The guests watched them, enchanted by the obvious connection between them. "I'm glad you didn't give up on me," Ethan murmured in Emily's ear. "I'm glad you learned to trust me," she replied, resting her head on his shoulder. Sarah, always attentive, captured every moment with her camera. "For the family's new book," she explained when Alexander questioned, "the true story of the Davidson Morgans." At midnight, when the party was at its peak, Ethan and Emily escaped to the second-floor balcony. The city glittered in the distance, the chain's hotels standing out in the night landscape. "Look!" Emily pointed to a newly installed billboard. On it, the new Davidson and Morgan Hotels logo shone. 2 families, 1 story, 1 future. "It's strange," Ethan reflected, embracing her from behind. "We started with a fake marriage to save a company, and we ended up discovering a truth that saved 2 families. And we found true love in the process," Emily completed, turning to face him. In the hall below, the guests continued celebrating. Helena was dancing with Robert, decades of hurt finally dissolved in forgiveness. Margaret was animatedly discussing the Foundation's new social projects with Mr. Chen. Alexander and Jason were finalizing the last details of the merger in a quiet corner, occasionally raising their glasses to the newlyweds on the balcony. Sarah, observing everything through her lens, smiled. The story that had begun with secrets and lies had transformed into a testament to the power of truth and love. "Ready for our honeymoon?" Ethan asked, softly kissing Emily's neck. "I can't wait," she replied, this time without hidden agendas. The couple observed the night for a few more moments, savoring the peace they had conquered. Below, the Davidson and Morgan families celebrated not just a wedding, but a new beginning. It was the start of a new chapter, not just for Ethan and Emily, but for all who had been touched by their story of redemption and love. A year passed since Ethan and Emily's wedding. The sun was rising over the city, illuminating the new headquarters of Davidson and Morgan Hotels, an impressive building that symbolized the union of the 2 families. In the president's office, now shared by the couple, Ethan was analyzing the latest financial reports while Emily participated in a video conference with international investors. "The numbers for the last quarter exceeded all expectations," she explained, her voice conveying confidence. "The expansion into the European market is progressing as planned." Mr. Chen, now a close friend as well as a business partner, smiled on the screen. "Your management model is becoming a case study at Harvard Business School." After ending the call, Emily joined Ethan by the panoramic window. "Who would have thought we'd be here a year ago?" "Building something real," he replied, kissing her. Softly. The intercom sounded and Sarah's voice filled the room. "Sorry to interrupt, but the family is arriving for the special lunch." In the top-floor restaurant, a table had been prepared for the monthly family gathering. Helena and Margaret arrived first, arm in arm like old friends. Robert and Alexander came next, animatedly discussing the Foundation's new projects. "The cultural center in the Morgan Mansion is doing amazing work," Alexander commented as everyone settled in. "The art classes for underprivileged children already have a waiting list." Jason entered hurriedly, carrying a folder. "Sorry I'm late, but you need to see this." He distributed copies of an international business magazine. On the cover was a photo of Ethan and Emily under the headline, "How 2 families transformed a crisis into an empire of transparency and innovation." Sarah, who documented every important family moment, began photographing the gathering. "For the archives," she smiled, capturing the moment Helena embraced her daughter. "I have an announcement to make," Emily said, standing up. All eyes turned to her. "Ethan and I are going to be parents," he completed, his smile lighting up the room. The news was received with exclamations of joy and tears of happiness. Margaret and Helena hugged each other, now united not just by family history, but by the future that was being announced. "A Davidson Morgan baby," Robert murmured, emotional. "The true symbol of our union." Alexander raised his glass. "To the new generation, who will be born into a world of truth and transparency." As the family celebrated, Ethan pulled Emily to the balcony. The midday sun bathed the city in a golden light, and the chain's hotels dotted the horizon like landmarks of their journey. "Do you regret anything?" he asked, his hand resting gently on her still imperceptible belly. "Nothing," Emily replied with conviction. "Every moment brought us here. The lies led us to the truth. Distrust taught us to trust. And a sham marriage gave us the truest love we could find." Back at the table, the Davidson and Morgan families, now one, were planning the future. Helena was showing Margaret the design for a new nursery that would be built in the company for employees. Robert and Alexander were discussing the expansion of the foundation's social programs. Sarah captured one last photograph. Everyone gathered, smiling, genuine. The image that would be the cover of the family's new book, telling not a story of secrets and betrayals, but of redemption and love. At the end of the afternoon, when everyone had left, Ethan and Emily remained in the office. The sun was setting on the horizon, painting the sky with shades of pink and gold. "You know what impresses me the most," Emily reflected, nestled in her husband's arms. "How something that started with so much deceit could transform into such a beautiful truth." Ethan kissed her forehead softly. "Maybe because deep down, there was always love. Even when we didn't know it, even when we were fighting against it." The phone rang. It was Mr. Chen again. Another expansion proposal, another vote of confidence in the empire they had rebuilt on solid foundations of honesty and transparency. As they discussed the details of the new project, Ethan and Emily exchanged knowing looks. They had learned that the greatest treasures were not in the hotel vaults or million-dollar contracts, but in the bonds they had built, the trust they had restored, the love they had discovered. Night was falling over the city, and the lights of Davidson and Morgan hotels began to shine, like stars guiding the way home. A home that now housed not two rival families, but a single family, united by truth and love. And so ends our story, not with secrets or lies, but with the promise of a bright future, built on the strongest foundations that exist: truth, forgiveness, and true love. Dear listeners, we hope that Ethan and Emily's journey has touched your hearts. For more exciting stories like this, don't forget to subscribe to our channel and leave your like. Share in the comments which city you're watching us from. Every day we bring new stories that explore the mysteries of the human heart and the transformative power of true love. Until next time.